I'm going to tell you a story tonight about a young guy named Brandon Swanson. And the thing about Brandon's story is that it's not really a secret or a very cold case, not anymore, because it actually changed the law in Minnesota, which is a rare thing for a disappearance. But despite being so public, and despite everything we know about the phone records and the police timelines, the core of what happened to him, the last moments, are still hidden in that black space between where he was and where his parents were trying to go to. It's a story about a long, confusing phone call that happened in the dark and a set of last words that sound more like a reflection than a goodbye. Let's talk about it. If you are into unsolved mysteries, true crime, missing 411, aliens and paranormal, then this is the right channel for you. Make sure you like this video and hit that subscribe button, because together we can grow this community and spread the love. So the whole thing starts just after midnight, right as May 14th rolls over into the 15th, 2008, out in the heavy dark of rural Minnesota. Brandon Swanson, who's 19, a college kid with a serious, kind face, has just finished up a small gathering with some friends in a town called Canby, and is heading home towards Marshall, a drive he's made 100 times. He's in his old Chevy Lumina, driving south on County Road 10, a two-lane road cut through flat fields, which are mostly pitch black at that hour, and is the kind of drive where you rely completely on your headlights, right? At some point, sources aren't exactly clear on the mechanism, but the car ends up off the road, stuck somehow in a ditch that was likely much deeper and muddier than it looked like in the dark. And now he's stranded, alone and miles from the nearest house. So Brandon does the natural thing. He calls his parents, Brian and Annette Swanson, at about 2 a.m., telling them that he's fine, just stuck, and he explains that he's near a town called Lind, which is a place they know well, telling his dad that he needs to grab his pickup truck and come pull the Lumina out of the mud. Now this is where the simple rescue call immediately starts to get strange, because the night is dark, the cell service is spotty, and Brandon is trying to describe his location by landmarks that his parents can't quite match up to what they know about the area. But they trust him, of course, because Brandon is a good kid and is not prone to drama. Brian grabs his keys and heads out to Worland, keeping Brandon on the phone the entire time, trying to zero in on where the Lumina is sitting cold in the ditch. As Brian drives, it quickly becomes clear that Brandon's visual cues aren't matching up to the landmarks Brian is passing, leading to the growing tension of the call, where Brandon is looking at his immediate environment and Brian is interpreting the information to the known geography of the Lind area. Brian is like, "Okay, are you near the highway sign of 423? And Brandon says, "No, I think I passed that." But the way he's describing the landscape, the long, dark stretch of road, the field of one side, is too generic, too much like every other mile of road in that part of the county. And this is where the conversation turns from a rescue mission into an increasingly frustrated search and rescue over the phone. To understand what happens next, you have to picture the geography. Look, Brandon had been hanging out earlier in Canby, about 30-mile drive north and west of the area where he first thought he was, which means he was essentially trying to navigate a route home to Marshall in the deepest dark of the night, likely on smaller back roads, right? The initial call placed him near Lind, which is a fairly straightforward location on Highway 23. But as the conversation stretches out, as the minutes tick past 2:30 a.m., something shifts, and Brandon changes his mind about where he is. He says to his dad, "Wait, I can see a light now. I think I'm actually near Porter." And now that's a big detail because Porter is about 10 or 12 miles north of Lind, back in the direction he just come from, up near the Yellow Medicine River area, which means he was lost and mislocating his position by over 10 miles when he first called. And that distance, those 10 miles, is the space where the whole mystery happens. Brian, his dad, who is now well past Lind and confused, has to turn around and head north again, toward this new potential location near Porter. But they're still talking on the phone, the connection holding. Brandon walking looking for a better reference point while Brian drives. The entire time the two are having the same conversation. Brandon says, "I can literally see your headlights now, you have to be right around the bend." And his parents, who are now both in the pickup, driving slowly, are saying, "No son, we don't see you, there's nothing but dark fields here." The truth, according to later police investigations and the phone tower records, is that Brandon's Lumina wasn't near Lynn at all, but was actually found later off an isolated, poorly marked dirt road near Taunton, which is a tiny town even farther north and east of Porter, on the edge of a section of land marked by the Yellow Medicine River. Police investigation summaries confirmed the cell phone pinged of a tower in Taunton, meaning Brandon was somewhere between those 2 points where the call started, which puts him miles away from where he thought he was and miles away from where his parents were searching during the first 30 minutes of the call. It was at this point, maybe 2:35 a.m., about 35 minutes into the phone call, that Brandon makes a decision based on what he thinks is his location. He tells his dad he's going to walk toward the light he sees in the distance, believing he's close enough to town that he can just cover the distance on foot and meet them at the light. His dad Brian is against it, asking him to just stay put by the car, but Brandon is clearly tired of waiting, confident he's found his bearings, and he steps away from the safety of the car, which his parents will find later, headlights still on, door ajar, exactly where he left it near Taunton. The call continues, now with the sound of Brandon walking in the dark, the movement of his feet crunching on the gravel or brush, his voice a little more breathless, all the while his parents are driving slowly, trying to cover the distance and the confusion between Lind and Porter, desperate to find one recognizable piece of information that will end this long strange night. The timeline from the phone records is ironclad. The call lasted just about 47 minutes. The parents, Brian and Annette, are completely operating in the dark, both literally and geographically. They've been on the phone with their son for the better part of 3/4 of an hour, driving on an isolated roads that all are starting to look the same in the dead of the night, going from Lind, then turning back north towards Porter, only to hear their son constantly repeat the impossible, "I can see you, you're right there." This creates a truly maddening paradox for them, because how can your son, who sounds completely sober and clear, tell you he sees your truck when you look out your windshield and see nothing but the beam of your own headlights and empty fields? Finally, around 2:45 a.m., Brian asks his son a direct question about whether he can see the Yellow Medicine River, which would confirm his location near Taunton and the area where his phone was pinging. But Brandon doesn't respond with a solid answer. Maybe because he's never been in that exact patch of land before. They continue to drive slowly and deliberately, their anxiety mounting because the sound of the other end is still his voice, still his footsteps, but the location is stubbornly invisible. And the initial simple plan of pulling a car out of a ditch has become a terrifying blind search in the middle of nowhere. At some point, Annette gets on the phone, taking over from Brian, trying a different angle, hoping a mother's voice might cut through the confusion. But Brandon just repeats that he's walking towards the light, confident that he's about to reach a small town. The simple reality is that they were probably miles and miles from one another, separated by the maze of unlit, unmarked roads that crisscross that remote section of the county. The call is moving toward its final moments, maybe 2:52 a.m., 47 minutes after it started. And Brandon is still walking, still reporting movement, and still saying, with what sounds like a mix of relief and increasing confusion, that he can see his parents' vehicle, while they can only see the darkness ahead of him. This is the last stretch of the conversation, the final details before everything goes silent, and the pacing is tense because Brandon is clearly focused on something that has entered his field of vision. Then about 47 minutes in, Brian hears his son's voice shift abruptly, going from determined walking to a sudden sharp reaction. Brandon says the last thing his parents will ever hear from him, just 2 words, simple and stark, cutting through the background noise of his movement. "Oh shit." And that's it. The sound cuts out immediately after that, but the line doesn't go dead, which is the crucial chilling detail, it doesn't sound like a dropped call, it doesn't sound like a phone getting smashed. The line is open, still connected, and you can hear the air on the other end. But no voice, no struggle, no footsteps, just silence. For the next several minutes, Brendan's parents just keep screaming his name into the open line. Brendan, Brendan, what happened? Are you there? But there's no response. They call the police right away, of course, reporting their son's missing, stuck in a ditch and the call cutting out. But because Brendan was 19, an adult, and because the police were initially operating on the assumption that he had simply gotten drunk and wandered off, a common assumption for a stranding young man, the immediate response was slow. It took until the next morning for the search to officially begin. And that delay, those critical early hours of the morning, are gone forever. When police finally did locate the Lumina, they found it abandoned, headlights still on, door ajar precisely where he said he'd left it, near a small body of water not far from Taunton, far from where they initially searched, verifying Brendan's second-hand location, but not his final destination. The official search for Brendan Swanson covered thousands of acres of fields, wooded areas and waterways in the triangle between Lind, Porter and Taunton, focused intensely on the area near the Yellow Medicine River, which runs to that remote farmland. The police used everything they had, helicopters, ground teams and cadaver dogs. And the dogs were the most frustrating lead because, according to police reports, they tracked Brendan's scent from the abandoned car for about 3 miles, following a route that took them over rough terrain, eventually leading abruptly near the river's edge. But the thorough search of the river found no body, no clothing, and no evidence that he had drowned. Since 2008, the case has remained stubbornly open. And there are 3 primary, non-official theories that circle around those 2 last words, and the resulting silent open line. The first theory, the most common, suggests that in the heavy dark, Brendan simply fell. Maybe he stumbled down a steep bank, and maybe he fell into the cold, fast-moving Yellow Medicine River, and the resulting shock or incapacitation caused the phone to slip into the water or be muffled, leading to the open line and the immediate silence. The second theory posits an encounter, a very brief, rapid interaction with another person, maybe a passing motorist or maybe a local resident, and the phrase, "oh shit," was a sudden, startled reaction to seeing a stranger. But there's no evidence of foul play or struggle. And finally, there's the simplest theory, that he came across some kind of wild animal, a deer or perhaps a coyote, and the words were a sudden expression of surprise at the close encounter, followed by him dropping the phone, which continued to ring on the ground. The one thing that's absolutely certain, beyond the geography and the phone records, is the systemic change that Brendan's disappearance forced. In 2009, Minnesota passed Brendan's law, which requires law enforcement to begin an immediate investigation and search for any missing person, regardless of their age or the initial belief or whether they left voluntarily. The old 42 or 70-hour waiting period for adults was gone, and that's his legacy, right? His parents fought for it, fueled by the agonizing loss of those first few hours of the search. Brendan Swanson is still missing, and if you have any information, you should contact the Lincoln County Sheriff's Office.